fire in your belly. Good morning breakfast. You gotta like that sucker.
Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is James Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 1 running back rankings for the 2023 fantasy football season. Over the course of today's episode, I'm going to be mentioning my top 36 ranked running backs, along with giving you guys my thought process and opinions and the statistics that justify these current rankings. Now, a couple things to keep in mind as we go throughout today's video. Every statistic that I mention is for a half PPR scoring format, meaning everyone in the middle whether you play in a standard league or a full PPR. Another thing to keep in mind, rankings are subject to change. Between now and Sunday, there is going to be a lot of information regarding injuries, whether it's running backs or even offensive linemen, that is going to be made apparent and public to us and can absolutely change these overall rankings. So for those of you who are trying to stay up to date on my latest rankings and content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Again, we're making daily fantasy football content for the entirety of the 2023 season with the singular purpose of trying to help you guys win a fantasy football championship, so be sure to do so today. Now, like I mentioned, between now and Sunday, there's going to be a lot of changes. On Sunday mornings, like I do every single season, Sunday morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, I'll be live streaming here on the channel. So for those of you who are trying to stay up to date, be sure to go ahead and join us there. Now, for those of you who are not able to make it but still want additional advantages over the course of the 2023 season, each month, be sure to travel down to the description of the video and check out Underdog Fantasy. At this current moment in time, if you sign up using code ANDREW and make a first-time deposit minimum of $10, not only will you get a first-time deposit match that you can use to be the best ball draft or potentially some people still talk about that in just a moment. You can also get my 2023 fantasy football draft guide if you haven't drafted yet already. But also, you will get weekly rankings from my email to yours every single week. Last thing I wanted to mention, of course, as soon as Christian McCaffrey joined the San Francisco 49ers, in the games in which he played, 50% or more of the offensive snaps, including the playoffs, he was averaging 20.31 half PPR fantasy points per game, averaging over 15 touches per game, and of course, 6 targets and 5 receptions per game. His overall utilization within this offense was workhorse level, and we're going to continue to see that utilization in 2023. I know that there is conversations regarding Elijah Mitchell. He's going to be active and healthy. When Elijah Mitchell has been with Christian McCaffrey, specifically last season, in those games, Christian McCaffrey about playing 67% of the offensive snaps, getting himself 17 points of opportunity, which is a combination of rushing attempts and targets, 16 touches per game, and 14.4 fantasy points per game. I truly do think, yes, there is going to be the impact of Elijah Mitchell, but it's not going to be significant enough for me not to start Christian McCaffrey as my number 1 going into the Pittsburgh match. Moving on, let's talk about Austin Ekeler, number 2. Now, Austin Ekeler takes on the Miami Dolphins this week, and we had the privilege of seeing these two teams take each other on last season in Week 14, where Austin Ekeler scored 20.4 half PPR fantasy points. He didn't find much success in terms of rushing yardage, but of course, 8 targets, 8 receptions, and having a bunch of receiving statistics, of course, elevates his game every single week. This is a running back that, of course, typically is going to find the end zone and is always going to have receiving upside. So regardless of the fact that the Miami Dolphins last season were the second best team in terms of allowing yards per attempt to opposing running backs, only allowing 3.7 last season. Now, this matchup between the Miami Dolphins and Los Angeles Chargers is going to be a little bit different because the coordinators are changing going into this matchup in comparison to last season. Of course, the Los Angeles Chargers have a new offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, and of course, the Miami Dolphins have a new defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio. Last time those two took each other on was Dallas versus Denver in 2021, and Dallas got shut out in the first 3 quarters of the game, and it led to, of course, the Denver Broncos mounting the Giants lead and pretty much winning that game. Obviously, there was a lot of sketchy play calling in that game because the Dallas Cowboys went for it twice on 4th down in the first quarter and then absolutely burned them. Nonetheless, I truly do believe that with Austin Ekeler, his receiving upside, his touchdown upside, he's on that. Let's talk about Nick Chubb taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. This is a division rival, so they'll have multiple opportunities taking on the Cincinnati Bengals defense. But over the course of the last 3 years, since 2020, in the games in which let's talk about DeAndre Swift. Now, DeAndre Swift's current overall number in terms of pickup for the Underdog Fantasy is 36.5 rushing yards. That pretty much means that we're expecting Rashad Penny and Kenneth Walker to be utilized in this offense enough to where it is going to impact DeAndre Swift. Let me just put this into a kind of perspective. DeAndre course of the last couple seasons, whenever he's played 50% or more percentage of the offensive snaps, he's averaging over 14 fantasy points per game. And that was, of course, with all the receiving. If we're not going to see DeAndre Swift utilize the receiving game for this offense, but at least get himself opportunities in the red zone, absolutely can be an RB2. It's just a matter of how much pending and painful we're going to see utilized in terms of snap counts and in the rotation. And once we've kind of gone ahead and established that after week 1, then we can get an idea as to whether or not we're starting DeAndre Swift moving forward. Moving on, let's talk about Brian Robinson Jr. starting going back to the Washington Commanders. Brian Robinson has a great opportunity, primarily because they take on the Arizona Cardinals. The Commanders, according to Vegas, are a 7-point favorite going into this game. They're the second highest favorite besides, of course, the Baltimore Ravens against the Houston Texans. So my expectation is that Dave Swift is going to lean in the direction of Washington Commanders running the ball. Brian Robinson last season was 5 for 16, averaged 16 rushing attempts per game, 65 rushing yards per game, and 9.45 fantasy points per game. If in fact this is going to be an easy walk in the park, going up against the Arizona Cardinals, who have a rookie quarterback by the name of Clayton Tune, this should be a matchup in which Washington is getting the ball back often.
Home's epic deals mean you can save on all things fall. Bring home bath towels and pillows from the midnight for $3.99.
Running the ball, defining success on the ground.
Chicago Cubs are a confusing franchise. A month ago, the Cubs were expected to be sellers at the deadline, especially for Cody Bellinger and Marcus Stroman, as both are free agents at the end of the season. After going on an 8-game winning streak at the end of July, though, they've decided to be buyers. Kind of. They traded for third baseman Jeimer Candelario, which is a fine move. This seems like a move they made because they had to. They are in a weak division this year, but even if they make the postseason, the team isn't good enough to make any real noise. That's why, to me, Chicago Cubs are a confusing franchise.
Team making the playoffs.
Do you think it's fool's gold, or do
I
you?
think we can get to 85.
So, no.
I don't know if it's. I've always said it, the only way to get into the playoffs is if they win the division. Listen, I could just receive myself after this, but Ellie doesn't scare me. The Reds don't scare me. Christian Yelich, I know he's found this kind of heater in Milwaukee. I know they have the better pitching, but I just think it's here for the taking. The biggest thing that we have going for you is myself and other people. You know, the run differential street there is we're top 5 in baseball right now. You know, at the end of the day, like those stats normally after 162 games even out. So I feel like after a while, considering we did add on, we added the Candyman, like hopefully Stroman picks it up. I feel like probably our best.
Yes. Still laying down. Yes.
I don't know where you think you're going. What? What? I'll be right back. Take my spot. It's my spot. Yeah, it's my spot. Yes. What? What are you trying to do? I don't know what you're doing. Your blanket's right there. Hmm?
still in it. What's wrong with you? You're fine. There's nothing on here. There's nothing on here. I'll use it. Huh? It's fine. You just spilled some water. It's my spot. You move. What do you need me to move for? Oh, shut up. You shut up. You get over it. Yeah, whatever.
But that trip to Vegas, in this economy, what are we, rich? Are we rich? We could get a personal chef.
Every year, hundreds of people go missing under baffling conditions in national parks and forests all across North America. One former police detective named David Blidas has begun investigating thousands of these very strange disappearances, and he outlines his findings in a book series called Missing 411. Today, I'm going to be looking at 3 cases that all fall within the Missing 411 phenomenon, where everybody involved claims to have been chased by someone or something out in the middle of nowhere. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right channel, because that's all we do, and we upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please give the like button and gift card to your favorite restaurant, but don't load any money onto it. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Alright, let's get into today's stories. Eloise Lindsay was a fresh college graduate, and she was at a crossroads in her life, because even though she just earned her degree, she really didn't know what she wanted to do with her life. And because she was an experienced backpacker, she thought a good way to, kind of get her life together would be to go on a sort of retreat, go out into the woods, go out into nature, and kind of find herself.
So she had planned this very detailed 43.3-mile hike along the Appalachian Trail, starting in South Carolina, where the first 7 days of the hike she would be totally on her own, and then at the 7-day mark she would meet up with a friend at a particular rendezvous point. Her friend would give her resupplies and would be her companion for the rest of the hike. When Eloise told her parents what her plans were, they were not concerned for her safety because she was an experienced backpacker. She had made trips like this before. And so they said, great, we'll see you when you get back. So on November 4th, Eloise sets out to begin her journey down the Appalachian Trail. And the first couple of days of her hike were great. The weather was beautiful, the scenery was amazing, and she had all this time to just kind of be by herself and look internal and think hard about what she wanted to do with her life. But on the third day, when she woke up, she was sleeping inside of a tent she had camped just off the trail. She woke up and she had this intense sense of dread. She couldn't really place where it was coming from, but she knew something was wrong. She's kind of doing inventory of her life. Like, what did I forget? Is there something that I'm just not thinking about right now? But she kind of pushes it aside mentally and thinks, okay, you know what, I'm just going to pack up my campsite here and get hiking, and I'm bound to come up with what it is that's making me feel this way. So she gets out of her tent and she begins packing up her campsite, and she's looking out, kind of scanning the tree line, not because she's looking for anything, but just because she happened to be looking out. And she could have sworn that she saw a man standing, 30, 40 feet away behind a tree. And she kind of did a double take and was staring at him. It's broad daylight, it's the morning, and they're near a trail. So what is it like unbelievable that there might be someone near her at that very moment? But she kind of did a double take and she looked at him again, and this person was gone. And she stood there for a minute, just kind of looking in the direction of where she had seen this guy, wondering, is my mind playing tricks on me? Did I really see someone there? Why aren't they showing themselves again? If there was someone there, they clearly must have just been looking at me. Why aren't they, poking their heads out again to communicate with me in some way? We're out in the middle of nowhere. We should be talking to each other. But the guy never shows himself again. And so as she's standing there wondering what she should do, she isn't ready to yell out to this person because there's part of her that's a little bit nervous about yelling out to some stranger in the middle of the woods. But she starts to get this really intense feeling that she's being watched, and it feels an awful lot like the sense of dread she had while she was in the tent. And she's starting to wonder, are my instincts or is my sixth sense picking up that I'm being watched, like there's some predator out there looking at me right now? And even though she has no way of knowing if that's actually true, she's alone in the middle of the woods, and even though she's experienced, she can't help but feel really vulnerable. And because this guy is just not showing himself again, she feels a little bit threatened. And so she begins to panic, and she starts packing up all of her stuff as quickly as she can. And as soon as she can, she takes off down the trail away from that guy she saw in the woods. As she was walking down this trail, she couldn't help but think someone was right behind her. She kept turning around to see if this person or whoever it was behind her, and no one was ever there. But this visceral feeling that she was being watched, that sense of dread she had, it just was not going away. And so she started walking faster and faster. Before long, she was running, and she's realizing that she's in a section of the Appalachian Trail that's very remote. She's not near civilization. She's not near her next rendezvous point. And so she's thinking to herself, I need to get off this trail, I need to get to a road, I need to get away from here as soon as I possibly can. And so her options were to continue on this trail for several miles, and it would probably take her until well into the night before she was going to reach civilization. Or she could take a shortcut, because she believed there was a road that was running parallel to her trail, but it was way down the mountain. It would require leaving the trail and basically cutting through the wilderness to get down to this road, but she was pretty confident it was right down there. And because this threat of this person or thing following her was so intense for her, she decided to leave the trail. She couldn't stand the idea of having to spend another night out in the middle of the woods with this person stalking her. And so she walks off the trail and starts running down the mountain. It wasn't long before she started to hear audible sounds coming from what she believed to be this person that was following her. And she would turn around and there'd be no one there, and then she started to walk, and trying to listen as she's walking, and she would hear footsteps far away from her, and she turned, and there'd be nobody there, but she was certain someone was following her, someone was stalking her. And the sounds that were coming out of this person, this animal, whatever it was, it sounded like, a deep male voice, but she couldn't recognize it as a language of some kind. It just sounded more like a grunt or a yell of some kind. And so her heart rate's elevated, she's panicking, and she's walking as fast as she can, just through the middle of the wilderness, hoping she's walking towards this road. But after walking and running for miles into the middle of nowhere. She has not come to a road. It's now completely dark out, and she knows she's lost. So she has to set up camp in the middle of nowhere, and she knows somewhere out in the middle of the woods is some person or something that is stalking her. She's all alone. She has no way to contact anyone. She doesn't have a cell phone. It's 1989. And so she sets up her campsite, and she gets in her tent. She zips it up, and she lays there hoping she doesn't hear any sounds. And sure enough, within minutes of being inside of that tent, she starts hearing those audible sounds coming from somewhere in the forest. And she hears what sounds like heavy footsteps walking around the perimeter of her campsite. All night long, she hears this. But luckily, they don't come up right to her tent. So there's some separation between her and whatever is making these sounds. And then finally, when the sun comes up, she is out of that tent, packs it up, and continues running in the direction she hopes is the road. And of course, all day long, she has that sense that someone is watching her. She's hearing footsteps coming from behind her. She would turn. She doesn't see anything. She would hear that audible grunting sound, that low voice coming from somewhere behind her. But again, she would never see whoever it was or whatever it was that was making the sound. And then again, the sun is starting to set, and she has not found the road. She hasn't found a trail. And she's thinking to herself, I can't even backtrack, because if I turn around and start walking backwards, I'm bound to run into this very thing I'm trying to escape. And so once again, she sets up her campsite in the middle of nowhere. She gets inside. And as soon as she's laying in her tent, she starts hearing those heavy footsteps somewhere out in the woods and walking around the perimeter of her campsite. She's hearing that low, audible sound that she can't quite place. And at some point, she falls asleep. She gets up the next morning. She jumps out of the tent, packs it up, and starts running, hopefully, in the direction that will bring her to civilization. A couple days later, when Eloise was supposed to meet her friend on the trail at the 7-day mark, and they were going to finish the hike together, well, Eloise doesn't show up. But after several hours, when Eloise did not show up, her friend left the trail and contacted authorities and filed a missing person report. And the police would launch this massive search for Eloise along the stretch of the Appalachian Trail where she had said she would be. And for the next 14 days, hundreds of police and volunteers and helicopters are scouring this area, and there's no sign of Eloise. And so after 14 days from the time her friend filed the missing person report, the police had to turn the search off and say, look, we can't find her. 2 days after the search was terminated, so 23 days after Eloise had initially set off for her trek through the Appalachian Trail, a hunter that was out in the middle of nowhere near the Appalachian Trail discovers Eloise perched up against a tree. She's totally emaciated, she's dehydrated, she's delirious, but she's alive. At first, she was terrified of the hunter because she believed the hunter was this person that had been following her. But when she realized he was there to help, she went with him. She was brought back and brought to the hospital, and she was checked out. And besides being dehydrated and emaciated, she was okay. And she would detail in multiple interviews and in her official statement that she had been chased for the past almost 3 weeks in the middle of the woods, and she doesn't know who it was or why they were chasing her. And then, interestingly, she said right before she was found, so a couple of days before this hunter finds her, this person, this thing, whatever it was that was following her, got so close to her a couple different times that she was so scared she ditched her backpack that contained all of her life-saving equipment, like her sleeping bag and her tent, and it had some food and water in there. She ditched that so she could be lighter, so she could run faster away from this thing that is chasing her in the woods. So you gotta figure, you gotta be at such a high level of fear that you're prepared to ditch the one thing you really require to survive out in the wilderness, which was her pack full of supplies. And then, after she's ditched her pack and she's run for some distance, she's got no supplies, no food, no water, she stumbles across this tree in the middle of nowhere that wedged inside the trunk is a cache of donuts and pound cake. And so she takes the donuts and pound cake, and between that and the stream water she had found, that's what kept her alive for the last few days before she was found. Eloise says she has no idea what to make of her experience, and law enforcement were baffled by it as well. Some people think Eloise had a mental break, and she effectively made this whole situation up, that she really was lost in the woods, but no one was chasing her, and she was just kind of paranoid and running around the wilderness for her. Other people, including park rangers that work that stretch of the Appalachian Trail, believe it's possible she could have been stalked by wild men, which are basically people that live out in the mountains that are effectively feral, that live off the land, and they've been known, according to local legend, they've been known to attack park rangers, and people that live out in that area have claimed to have seen these wild men, and they kind of match the description of what she was describing. But as of right now, there's no official explanation for what happened to her, other than she got lost and was found again.
It's your compact. Earn a degree you'll be proud of. Apply now at purdueglobal.edu. More choices, more wow, more love. Tyson.
On June 7, 1951, two families from Santa Fe, New Mexico met up at the Santa Fe ski basin to have a picnic together and to enjoy the mountain air. During the summer months when there's no snow on the ground, the Santa Fe ski basin is a very popular location for hikers because the terrain is very rugged, and if you get up to the top of the basin, there's these incredible views overlooking the valley. But on this day, the two families decided they wanted to have a picnic at the base of the basin, basically looking up the mountain. As the parents were setting up the picnic site, the kids started playing together. And that was Larry and Janet McGee, who were brother and sister, aged 7 and 5 respectively, and Stephen Cross, who was 3 years old. After they finished setting up their picnic site, they looked around and realized the kids are gone. And they were thinking, we just saw them like 2 minutes ago, so they can't have gone very far. And so they start looking around for their kids, and they can't find them. They're yelling out for them. And they're starting to get a little bit more worried, and they start branching out farther and farther, and they realize the only other place they could have gone is up into the woods, which are very steep and very rugged. So they're thinking, well, they can't have gone into the mountains. That would be impossible for these young kids to get very far, and they aren't responding to our calls. It's possible they could have been abducted. And so one of the parents ran down to the main building of the actual ski resort where they kept a staff member in there during the summer months, and they were able to get inside and use the phone, and they called authorities. So the police come out and they set up these huge spotlights that are aimed up at the mountain. And so the idea was, if the kids did get up into the mountain somehow, they would see these lights and hopefully walk down to them. After they set up the spotlights, the police began combing the side of the mountain in hopes that the kids would not have done it. But despite the spotlights and hundreds of searchers and people yelling out for these kids, they never heard back from the kids. They didn't find them, and so all night they're looking for them. And they're realizing that there's a pretty good chance they're probably not here, and that means they've probably bored of them. And so by the following afternoon, things are really starting to look around. There's no sign of these kids anywhere. And that's when a searcher was way outside of the primary search area. They were about 3.5 miles away.
I gave you all that space over there after you told me to move.
They're up there and they're looking around, and they're getting ready to
Remember,
move.
you told me to move.
They see something out of the corner of their eye that looks like a person. They turn around, and one of the kids
You said,
poking their head up
move,
from
Daddy,
behind the bar.
move. You made me move from sitting next to you over here, so now you're going to come over here?
Inside, just down the block, and they were all okay. As the searchers are picking them up and calling them in, they're thinking to
Doesn't make
themselves,
any sense.
how in the world did these kids get
Get
so
up
far away? Once the children were brought back down to the search headquarters and were reunited with their parents and were checked out by a doctor who said, yep, they're a little dehydrated, but they're okay. After all that was done, the police asked them the question, and everybody was thinking, how did you get where you were found? And Larry, the oldest of the group, he was 7 years old. It took him a minute, but eventually he said, they were playing around the picnic area, and they went just barely into the tree line, and all of a sudden a bear came out from behind the tree and began chasing them. And the three of them ran 3.5 miles up the mountain to find this log, which they jumped inside of, and they hid inside this log from this bear, which apparently was patrolling the area looking for them. And in addition to this bear that was apparently walking around the area looking for them, Larry said they were especially scared of the gorilla that was walking around the area looking for them as well. Now, it's easy to discount Larry and the kid's story because you could say, okay, well, the gorilla they saw was actually just a searcher looking for them. Except there was no one in that area looking for the kids near that log until right before they were found. It was kind of like a last-ditch effort to push outside the boundaries of the main search area. It was just kind of a miracle they actually located them. And Larry and the kids were saying this gorilla and this bear were looking for them on the first day and first night they were out there. So there were no searchers out there at that time. As for the bear, there have been bear sightings in the Santa Fe ski basin, although it is fairly rare. But if it was a bear that was chasing these kids, it would have caught them. A bear is not going to not be able to catch 3 small children running uphill. So either there wasn't a bear, or it was some other animal that might have resembled a bear. But what type of an animal would chase 3 small children who are very vulnerable 3.5 miles up a mountain only to abandon them? But even if we say, you know what, there's no way the bear and the gorilla had anything to do with this, this is just kids who got lost and they wound up in the woods and they were found, and that's it. Fine, but I have a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I can tell you right now, there's no way they could cover a 3.5-mile distance uphill in really rugged mountainous terrain in a 24-hour cycle. There's no way. Without help, that's not possible. I would say the only caveat to that would be if my children were fearful for their lives, in which case adrenaline would kick in, and they probably could cover that distance in a 24-hour period. That certainly lends credibility to the idea that Larry, Janet, and Steve were in fact running for their lives, and they had that adrenaline kick, and that's how they were able to cover that distance. But were they really running from a bear or a gorilla? We don't know. And there's been no further investigation into this case, and I think that's because the kids were found alive. The parents, the police, they're happy, and everybody moved on.
It's Eric. I am 39 years old. I've started thinking about getting Botox Cosmetic for the last couple of years.
From 2002 to 2006, Colin Faherty was perhaps the most successful college quarterback in history, winning 3 national championships and being named the Division II Player of the Decade. He was also perhaps the toughest college quarterback in history. Most quarterbacks will spend their careers looking to avoid getting smashed by defenders, not Colin. Colin was 6'2", 240 pounds, and he would tell his teammates that he wanted to get hit. He would get back. His coaches hated it about him, but his teammates loved this about him. Colin was also famous for playing through injuries. His junior year in college, he broke his collarbone, and he didn't tell anyone, and he played through an entire playoff series that he won. After college, Colin's professional football career was not nearly as successful as his amateur one. He played briefly for 2 NFL football teams, the Baltimore Ravens and the Denver Broncos, but when he wasn't getting any playing time, and he just could see the writing on the wall that this was not going to be a match, he was not going to make it in the NFL, he left for Europe to play in the European Football League. But when his European football career started to sputter out as well around 2009, he came back to the United States where he joined a very small-time indoor arena football league. And while Colin's love of football was still there as much as it ever was, he knew at this point, playing at this low level, that his career was effectively over. Around the same time that Colin was hanging up his football cleats, he would meet Jennifer, who would become his wife. She was an all-state volleyball player, and in many ways was just as competitive and as athletic as Colin was. They were kind of like a perfect match for each other. They married in 2010, and Colin, this big man, big-time quarterback, was shaking and crying at the altar because he was so nervous and excited about marrying Jennifer. Because I think this was a really big turning point for him, where he was basically putting football in the past and starting this new life and building a family with Jennifer, and he was really excited about it. The newlywed couple moved into a house together in Michigan where they had 2 kids, and Colin landed a good job in medical sales, and by all accounts, Colin was just hitting his stride post-football. On Memorial Day weekend in 2013, Jennifer's family was planning this 3-day fishing trip along the Baldwin River in Michigan, and the Fahertys decided they would join them. And so Colin and his wife and kids, they rented a cabin that was going to be near the campsite that Jennifer's family was staying at. And for the entire weekend, it was just this great fishing trip.
You can go on this hill.
Time, and the weather was beautiful.
Why would you do
and on May 26th, so the last night of this 3-day fishing trip, Colin, who had recently purchased this pontoon boat that they had used for this fishing trip, he wanted to just go out one more time on his boat, this boat that he was really proud of, and fish for another 30-45 minutes before ending the weekend. So Colin put on his waders and his jacket, and grabbed his fishing pole, and he had his family drive him to the stairs that led down to the water where his pontoon boat was. Before he walked down the steps, he turned and told his family that he'd be out for about 30 or 45 minutes, and that he wanted to be picked up at the next boat ramp down the way, and that he would call when he needed to run. 42 minutes later, at 9:27 p.m., Jennifer receives a phone call from her husband. She's expecting it to be a call where he says, "Okay, I'm ready to get picked up." But when she answers the phone, Colin is frantic. He's telling her that he's being followed by 2 men in the tree line. He's out on the water on his pontoon, but there are 2 men in the tree line. He can't see, but he can hear them. They've been following him for some time. Before Jennifer can even get a word out, Colin says to her that he's going to beach the boat and take his clothes off. and then he hangs up. Jennifer immediately tries calling Cullen back repeatedly. He's not picking up. And so she's left this great fishing trip where everybody had a great time and the weather was beautiful. And on May 26th, he was shaking and crying at the altar because he was so nervous and excited about marrying Jennifer. Because I think this was a really big turning point for him, where he was basically putting football in the past and starting this new life and building a family with Jennifer, and he was really excited about it. The newlywed couple moved into a house together in Michigan where they had 2 kids, and Cullen landed a good job in medical sales. And by all accounts, Cullen was just hitting his stride post-football. On Memorial Day weekend in 2013, Jennifer's family was planning this 3-day fishing trip along the Baldwin River in Michigan, and the Finnertys decided they would join them. And so Cullen and his wife and kids, they rented a cabin that was going to be near the campsite that Jennifer's family was staying at. And for the entire weekend, it was just this great fishing trip where everybody had a great time and the weather was beautiful. And on May 26th, so the last night of this 3-day fishing trip, Cullen, who had recently purchased this pontoon boat that they had used for this fishing trip, he wanted to just go out one more time on his boat, this boat that he was really proud of, and fish for another 30-45 minutes before ending the weekend. So Cullen put on his waders and his jacket and grabbed his fishing pole, and he had his family drive him to the stairs that led down to the water where his pontoon boat was. Before he walked down the steps, he turned and told his family that he'd be out for about 30 to 45 minutes, and that he wanted to be picked up at the next boat ramp down the way, and that he would call when he needed to ride. 42 minutes later, at 9:27 p.m., Jennifer receives a phone call from her husband. She's expecting it to be the call where he says, "Okay, I'm ready to get picked up." But when she answers the phone, Cullen is frantic. He's telling her that he's being followed by 2 men in the tree line. He's out on the water on his pontoon, but there are 2 men in the tree line that he can't see, but he can hear them. They've been following him for some time. And before Jennifer can even get a word out, Cullen says to her that he's going to beach the boat and take his clothes off. And then he hangs up. Jennifer immediately tries calling Cullen back repeatedly. He's not picking up. And so she's left feeling totally confused about what her husband has just told her. But what stood out to her was how scared he sounded on the phone. And fear was not something she typically associated with Cullen. This beast of a man, this tough football player, he didn't get scared. So for him to be that scared sounding and to be describing people basically stalking him, she knew he was in serious trouble. So she calls 911 and she describes where he is in the Baldwin River, and will please take her report and say we'll send someone else right away. After Jennifer got off the phone with police, she called her family and told them about this really strange phone call from Cullen and how she had just called the police and she didn't know what to do. And so her brother tried calling Cullen, and Cullen answered. And when he did, Matt said, "Hey Cullen, where are you?" And Cullen would say, "I don't know where I am. There's these 2 guys that are still following me." And Matt would say, "Are you still in the boat or are you on land?" And all Cullen said is, "It's getting pretty rough out here." And he hung up. Afterwards, Matt would call Jen and he would tell her about this phone call to Cullen, and it really didn't add any clarity to the situation. And so Jen and her family decide the best thing they can do is go to the boat ramp where Cullen had said he wanted to be picked up, in hopes that maybe he would make his way there and they would find him. So Jennifer and her family head out to this location, and Cullen's not there. They get out, they're yelling for him. There's no sign of him, and shortly after, a police car would show up because this was one of the areas where Jennifer had said, when she spoke to the police, that Cullen might be. So the police officer gets out, they take an official statement from Jennifer, and at this point they file an official missing person report. Before the police began looking for Cullen, they reached out to his wireless service provider, and they asked them to ping his cell phone from the tower. Any service provider has the ability to roughly triangulate the location of a cell phone based on the last few locations of the phone. The last 4 locations that the service provider pinged for Cullen were up to 4 miles apart from each other, which was bizarre in its own way, because the idea that in a very rugged, rough area in a very short amount of time, that Cullen had been moving 4, 5, 6, 7 miles just to get to these different points, that didn't really make sense. But also when they looked at these points on a map, it looked like each of them was either near a paved road, or in order to get to them, you would have had to cross a paved road. And so they're thinking to themselves, why does he keep moving point to point if at any one of these locations he's near relative safety? But as strange as these 4 locations were, the police now had a really solid starting point. So they dispatched people to each of these points, and they began combing along the river where he had last been seen. And within an hour, they discovered his boat was a little ways down from where he had been dropped off. It was missing an oar, and it was basically beached on the side of the river. It wasn't clear if it had been intentionally beached, but Cullen wasn't in it. And when they searched around the area, they couldn't find any sign that Cullen was in the area. Yelling for him, he wasn't coming back. Interestingly, a man who owned property near where the pontoon boat was found reported to police hearing screaming or yelling coming from the area where the boat was found around the same time that Cullen went missing. But despite this piece of information, it didn't actually help them discover where Cullen actually went. For the next 48 hours, police and hundreds of people searched in the areas where his cell phone was pinged and along the river where his pontoon had been found, but there was no sign of him. Then, on the evening of May 28th, approximately 48 hours after Cullen had gone missing, they discovered his body. It was located less than a half mile away from a paved road, and it was situated in between those 4 points that the cell phone provider had given. He was laying completely face down with his right arm under his body and his left arm over his head, clutching some grass. When they rolled him over, he had some blood coming out of his nose, but besides that, there was no significant trauma anywhere on his body. Cullen appeared to be wearing all of his clothes. However, it was noted that the strap on his waders was really badly twisted. Now, if he had never taken his clothes off, that would have been something he would have fixed. It would have been very uncomfortable when he started this trip to go fishing. That would have been something he would have fixed. Now, he said to his wife on the phone that he was going to be taking his clothes off, which there was no explanation for that, but he clearly said that to his wife when she reported that to the police. And so some have speculated that between that phone call and finding him with the twisted strap on his waders, that indicates that perhaps his clothes did come off at some point over the past couple of days and were put back on again, either by him or by someone else. His cell phone had also been found in his front pocket, indicating that those cell phone pings had been his actual location. Initially, Cullen's autopsy was completely inconclusive. There was no trauma to his body. There was no obvious thing that had killed him. But later on, it was determined he died of pneumonia caused by inhaling his own vomit. So we don't know how you get to a place where you're inhaling your own vomit, but I would imagine you're in a pretty panicked state of mind that could happen to you. Many people believe Cullen's death was the result of a traumatic brain injury caused by all the years of playing football and getting hit in the head. And so that can lead to paranoia, and so perhaps this was a fit of paranoia. He got turned around, he got scared, he thought somebody was chasing him, and then, he vomits and inhales his vomit, and that ultimately kills him. And in 2011, Cullen had briefly shown signs of being a little bit paranoid when one day he thought someone was following him, and he actually went to a family member's house and said, I think someone's following me, but he could never identify where this person was or who they were. But even if this was a fit of paranoia and no one was following him in the woods, well, why didn't he stop on the paved road every time he crossed it? Because that would have represented safety. I mean, in 2011, when he supposedly had another fit of paranoia, his instincts were to go to a family member and to seek help. And so you would think his instincts in this situation would be similar. He would seek help, he would seek safety, but he continuously left safety. He left the road. He left his boat. His boat was safe. Why did he leave his boat? And even if we turn this around and we say, no, it was not a fit of paranoia, that he was in fact being followed by someone or something in the woods, well then why would that prompt him to call his wife and say, I'm going to get out of the boat and take my clothes off, and then proceed to walk 4, 5, 6, 7 miles in a very short period of time, crossing over a paved road at least 1 or 2 times, and not stopping, not signaling for help? That doesn't make sense either. And what was that screaming that resident heard coming from the area where the pontoon boat was found? Unfortunately, there are many questions in this case, and the vast majority of them will go unanswered. So that's going to do it, guys. If you found the secret in today's episode, let us know in the comments what it is and where you found it. So give us the timestamp, and the first one to do that will pin you at the top of the comment section. If you enjoyed today's video and you haven't done this already, please give the like button a gift card to their favorite restaurant, but don't put any money on it. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly 3, 4, even 5 video uploads. If you want to get in touch with me, you can direct message me on Instagram or on Twitter. My username for both platforms is the same. It's JohnBallin416. I also have a ton of content over on TikTok where my username is Mr. Ballin. If you have a story suggestion, please submit it to a subreddit just called Mr. Ballin. It's linked in the description below. So whether I see you on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, or some combination, just know that I really appreciate your support, and until next time, that's going to do it. See you.
You're gonna need these.
Today, we're going to look at 3 unsolved mysteries that each have lots of evidence, but no one can make sense of them. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right channel because that's all we do, and we upload 3 or 4 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please offer to make the like button a nice hot cup of coffee when you wake up, and then proceed to make them an extremely weak and lukewarm cup of coffee with too much milk and too much splendor. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Alright, let's get into today's stories. In 1993, David Lewis was an accomplished lawyer living in Amarillo, Texas, with his wife Karen and his 9-year-old daughter. He was known to be a devoted husband and father who spent much of his off time supporting various charitable causes. On January 28th of that year, Karen and their daughter decided to leave Amarillo and go to Dallas to spend the weekend shopping together. David, who would normally go with them, decided to stay home because he did not want to miss the Super Bowl, which was that Sunday, the 31st. So Karen and their daughter left, and then a couple of days later, on the 31st, they returned to Amarillo, and they actually got back to their house right after the Super Bowl had ended. And so they anticipated going into the house and finding David either cleaning up after himself or maybe watching the post-game. But when they walked in, the TV was still on and turned to the channel the Super Bowl had been on, but David was nowhere to be found. Karen noticed that the VCR was actually still recording. David was known to record all major sports teams and watch them again, and so clearly he had not turned off the recording. As Karen walked around the house yelling for her husband, she wasn't that concerned. She figured he must have stepped out or something. But she went into the kitchen and she opened up the fridge and she found there was a plate with 2 freshly made turkey sandwiches on it, which was a sandwich David would often make. And she thought that was pretty weird that he would have made them and then let them sit inside the fridge. And so she closed the fridge and turned around, and on the counter in the kitchen was his wedding band and his watch. And so even though there were all these kind of strange things that Karen was finding in the house, she really wasn't that concerned. There was no sign of forced entry, there was no sign the house had been burglarized, there was no sign of struggle, and so she assumed her husband must have stepped out to watch the second half of the game at a friend's house, and that he would be back later. And so Karen stayed up for a little while, but then ultimately she went to bed thinking he would be there in the morning. But the next morning when she got up, there was no sign of her husband, and so she went to the police. Within 24 hours, the police located David's abandoned car downtown near the courthouse. Under one of the car's floor mats, they located his car keys as well as his house keys. And then within the car, they found his checkbook, his credit cards, and his driver's license, all in the places they should be. They looked into his bank activity, and they saw there was a recent deposit for $5,000 into his family's account. They also saw that he recently purchased 2 plane tickets. One was from Los Angeles to Dallas, and the other was from Dallas to Amarillo, but it wasn't clear if he had used either of these tickets. When Karen was told about the found car and the strange bank activity, she told police that her husband had recently told her that he actually thought he might be in danger, because he was scheduled to give a deposition in Dallas later that month in a conflict of interest case between his old law firm and a wealthy client. And David was being pressured to cover up some of the wrongdoings of his previous law firm, and he just wasn't willing to do that. He told his family that he was going to tell the truth no matter who it hurt. David understood that put a huge target on his back. While police were certainly intrigued at this new information, they didn't have any evidence to support the idea that someone was actively trying to silence David. It was just a conspiracy. And so for 11 months, they looked for new leads and new information, but nothing came out, and David never popped up, he never called home, there was no sign of him. And so after 11 months, the police decided that David must have left of his own accord and that there was no foul play here, and so they closed the case. And after that, David's family unfortunately just had to accept the fact that he was gone and that more than likely no one was ever going to find him again. But in 2004, a state trooper in Washington State was on the internet just researching unsolved mysteries, and he came across a picture of David Lewis. And immediately he recognized that he looked exactly like an unidentified victim of a hit and run case he covered back in 1993. And so he pulled up the details of this hit and run, and he found the victim had been struck a day after David Lewis had gone missing. When this John Doe got hit, he was dressed head to toe in military clothing, he had no bags, he had no ID, and he was walking aimlessly down Highway 24 in Washington State, so 1,600 miles away from Amarillo, Texas, where David Lewis had gone missing. But despite the enormous distance between these two events, this trooper was convinced David Lewis was this John Doe. But as he's looking at the picture of David Lewis, he realizes he has glasses, and he didn't think that John Doe was wearing glasses. But just to be sure, he checked the belongings list of the John Doe, and it said he did have glasses. And it was the exact same kind that David was wearing in the picture. And eventually, DNA would confirm that David Lewis was the John Doe. Now, this solved the mystery of where David Lewis went, but it did not solve the mystery of why he went there. Why did David go to Washington, a place where he has no ties? And if David was the one who hit record on his VCR on the night of the Super Bowl, that means he would have only had less than 24 hours to move 1,600 miles to Washington State without his car. And why was he wearing military clothing? Is that his clothing? Did he buy it? Did someone make him wear it? Where was his luggage? What was he doing walking down the highway? David's assertions to his wife that his life was in danger, his demeanor as a loving family man, and the nature of his job as an attorney has many people, his family included, believing that he was the victim of foul play. But officially, the police have said David left the house of his own accord and his death was ruled an accident. In 2000, Mary Lou Morris was a 48-year-old loan officer at a Chase Bank in Houston, Texas. On the morning of October 12th, Mary Lou said goodbye to her husband, Jay, and she headed off to work. That afternoon, Jay gave his wife a phone call, but she didn't pick up. He left her a message, and she never got back to him. This was very unlike Mary Lou, so Jay was a little bit concerned. At 5 p.m., when he still hadn't heard from her, Jay called her back, but again, she didn't pick up. So Jay called Mary Lou's supervisor, who informed Jay that Mary Lou had actually not come to work that day, and they couldn't get in touch with her either. Jay immediately knew something was wrong and he called the police. The police had not even begun searching for her when a call came into the station from an ATV rider that happened to be on a road about 3 miles away from Mary Lou's house. And he said he spotted a smoldering car, and it looks like there's someone in the driver's seat that's obviously deceased. Earlier that day, at about 10 a.m., the fire department had gotten a call about smoke in that area, but they assumed it was a controlled burn, so they didn't investigate. When the police arrived on scene, it was impossible to tell who the person was that was sitting in the driver's seat, but they were able to find a tooth fragment, and they used that to confirm that it was in fact Mary Lou Morris. It was quickly determined that this was most likely a homicide, and her attacker had probably set this up to make it appear like it could have been self-inflicted. Gasoline had been poured all over Mary Lou and all over the vehicle. However, because of how badly damaged the car and she was, they couldn't determine a cause of death, so they weren't sure if she was deceased when she was placed in the car and it lit a fire, or if she was in the car and the fire was the cause of death. A number of Mary Lou's valuables were still inside of the car, but her wedding ring was not on her finger. Mary Lou's family and the community at large were shocked. They just could not understand why anybody would want to target such a nice person that had no enemies. The day after Mary Lou's death, a local Houston newspaper received an anonymous call from a guy who just said Mary Lou's death was an accident. And the newspaper tried to get more information, but the person hung up and they couldn't trace the call. At the same time this drama was unfolding for Mary Lou Morris, another drama was unfolding for another Houston woman with the same name. 39-year-old Mary McGinnis Morris was a successful nurse practitioner who by and large got along with all of her coworkers with one exception. A new employee at the clinic, a male nurse named Dwayne Young, was making her feel really uncomfortable. One day, when Mary McGinnis got back to her desk, she found all of her pictures of her family had been flipped onto their faces, and in the middle of her desk was a piece of paper that just said, "Death to her." And she knew right away this had to be Dwayne, but she had no way to prove it. And so that night, when she went home, she told her husband, Mike, about this guy, Dwayne, and she said, "I don't feel safe at work. Can you teach me how to shoot a gun?" And so he did. He taught her how to shoot a gun, and then he went out and got a pistol, and she tucked it under her driver's seat in her car just in case. On October 16th, so 4 days after Mary Lou Morris was found dead, and 3 days after that anonymous phone call to the newspaper, Mary McGinnis Morris was at a drugstore after work. And as soon as she went inside, she noticed there was this strange man on the other side of the store that was just watching her. She called her best friend Lori to tell her that there was this strange guy and wanted to know what to do. And Lori said, wait for him to leave. But the guy didn't leave. He stayed in the store and stared at Mary. And so eventually Mary said, you know what, I'm just going to pay for my stuff and get out of here. I got to stop by the office, but I'll be home in just a few minutes and I'll be totally fine. And so Mary hangs up, she buys what she needs, and she leaves the store. And then 12 minutes later, she places a frantic 911 call saying someone's trying to kill her. And this 911 call was not made public because apparently on the tape you can actually hear her being attacked. Mary McGinnis was found later that night in her car. She was deceased. She had a single gunshot wound to the head. It was clear from her 911 call that she had been attacked, and so this was almost certainly a homicide. However, her attacker tried to stage it so it looked like it was self-inflicted. The murder weapon, which was actually her pistol that was tucked underneath her seat, had been placed next to her hand on the seat next to her. None of Mary McGinnis's valuables was stolen. However, her wedding ring was missing from her finger. After Mary McGinnis Morris's death, people began to speculate that her death and Mary Lou Morris's death were connected. Specifically, this was a professional hit gone wrong. The reasoning for this theory is there was just too many coincidences. They shared the same name, they lived in the same city, they were killed within days of each other, and both of their deaths were staged to look like they were self-inflicted. And each woman was missing their wedding ring, which apparently is a common way for professional hitmen to let their clients know that the job was done. The people that subscribe to this theory believe Mary McGinnis Morris was the intended target, and Mary Lou Morris was just an accident. And in fact, after killing Mary Lou Morris, the hitman must have realized, whoops, I made a mistake, and they called the newspaper to say, literally, that was a mistake. And then a couple of days later, the hit was successfully carried out on Mary McGinnis Morris. The police looked into this theory, and they discovered that Mary McGinnis' husband, Mike, had recently accused her of cheating on him. He was really upset about it. He also refused to take a polygraph test and would not allow his daughter to talk to the police. And Mary McGinnis had a $700,000 life insurance policy that Mike was in line to receive. And so immediately everybody's like, okay, obviously Mike put a hit out on his wife, and that's what started this whole thing. But when they dug into it, they realized that no matter how upset Mike was, there wasn't any evidence that tied him to the killing of his wife or to Mary Lou Morris, so he was ruled out as a suspect. As for Mary McGinnis' co-worker, Dwayne Young, who wrote death to her on her desk, it was clear that he did not like Mary, but he was ruled out as a suspect as well. And unfortunately, that's where both of these cases go cold. To date, no one's ever been charged in either murder. In 1996, Blair Adams was 31 years old and living in Surrey, British Columbia. Although in the past he had struggled with substance abuse and alcoholism, over the previous 2 years he had really gotten his act together and got a great job as a foreman at a local construction company. He was known to be a cheerful and friendly guy that did not have any known enemies. But that summer, Blair started exhibiting uncharacteristic mood swings that his mother would describe as being frequent and wild. In a matter of weeks, Blair transformed from being very calm and relaxed and friendly to being totally panicked all the time and always looking over his shoulder. He was so stressed out he couldn't sleep at night. He began telling his co-workers that he was fairly certain someone was trying to kill him. And they would say to him, Blair, I don't think you're okay, you really need to see a doctor. When his mother confronted him about his erratic, paranoid behavior, he told her, Mom, I really shouldn't tell you about it. And she said, what's it? He said, Mom, I can't say anything else. And that was it. She could never get any more information out of her son. Blair's strange behavior came to a head on Friday, July 5th, when he went to his bank and withdrew all of the cash out of his account, totaling $6,000, and he also emptied his safety deposit box, which contained thousands of dollars worth of jewelry and gold. 2 days later, on Sunday, he left his house and drove 30 minutes to the Canada-USA border, and he attempted to enter the United States. But being a single guy carrying a bunch of cash and jewelry and acting really nervous, he fit the profile of a drug trafficker, and so he was denied entry. Frustrated, Blair left and went back to his house, and the next day, which was Monday, he went to his construction site and he abruptly told his boss that he was quitting. And he didn't even pick up his final paycheck, he just left. After leaving the construction site, he went straight to the airport where he promptly purchased a $1,600 round trip to Frankfurt, Germany. Although we don't know why he wanted to go to Frankfurt, Germany, he did work there briefly the year before. His flight was supposed to leave the following day, which was Tuesday, but immediately after purchasing his plane ticket, Blair suddenly decided that he needed to try again to cross into the USA. So he rushed to a friend's house and knocked on her door. She opens it up, he looks totally disheveled, and he's telling her that someone's
Look here with me, buddy. Come on.
No.
This is up.
Look.
You got one?
No.
Yeah, you do.
Thank you. Whoa. Huh?
here.
Get.
No, there's one over here. Facing the wrong way. You can't see TV. Turn around. You want another one? There's another one. Open. Another one.
Oh, my father.
One thing at a time, buddy.
My father.
One thing at a time.
My father.
Give it donuts. There you go. Who's that?
My father. My father. Come here.
Lay down, buddy.
My father.
And go get it.
I like it. Mom? Where we go?
I'm taking a nap, buddy. You're supposed to be taking a nap too. Stop fucking hitting me with it. Again.
New business hours, 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. What? That is totally unfair. But where's right? That's totally unfair. Let me get to work earlier, like 5 hatred.
No, I mean ingredients with a stick in ingredients.
They're coming for me. No, no, no! Take that!
Wait, where did you get that piano? We're trying something else. I'm going to say a word, and I want you to say the first word that pops in your head. Ready? Word. Spatula.
Spatula.
Bun. See, the key is to say something different than what I say.
Oh, okay. I got it.
Potato.
Potato.
Tomato.
Tomato.
I've laid out some words on cards here. These words are common kitchen ingredients. I want you to arrange them in any order you choose. It could be a poem or a secret formula. Oh yes, a secret formula. Good, let's do that. Yes. Oh, okay. I'll be over here then.
I'm finished. I'm returning to a piano.
Since your mind has been resistant to every method technique so far, I'm forced to resort to my most powerful method of curing you.
Convert.
No, hypnosis.
Hypnosis.
Now, keep your eyes on this watch. When I count to 3, you will fall into a deep sleep. 1, 2, and 3. Now, I snap my fingers. You will awaken to me the formula. Hey, wake up! What else is not obnoxious? Why won't you wake up? Hey, SpongeBob. I heard your brain was sick, so I brought you this cookie pizza.
Thanks.
And here's some chocolate milk.
The king of flavor dairy drinks. Oh, Daddy, I'm so glad we're friends again.
Just remember, SpongeBob, I'll always be with you. Right here.
My card.
Actually, in your arteries. Now do me a favor. Wake up. Wake up.
I'm cured.
What about the formula?
Oh, you're right. I better get back to work. That's where everything died.
No, it's a lie. Therapy doesn't really work. You're still sick. Very, very sick. Good to see your friends out here, boy.
Yeah, I just made some treatment off.
Well, I can safely say, well, they're 24-hour shifts. It's 23 hours of plenty. No, seriously. Get back to work.
No, get away from the house. Wednesdays are here on Nickelodeon. Yes! You feel it's brand new. Really? And Slime Time is too. So, best day ever! But I can't get that slime. Everyone wins with new episodes of Young Dylan and Slime Time. Next week, Nixon on Nickelodeon. I'm peacefully protesting the whole work industry is watching TV for change. It's new Push Pop Gummy Puppies. Sweet and squishy gummies from the container that lets you pop all the gummies for delicious fun. Full Push Poppets. New Push Pop Gummy Poppets. Magic mixes new magic in there. Opening the TV rotation summer. Crack the code. And look for that. Combine the power of Genius Ring. It's almost live. Drop the map. Next Wednesday night. Amazing. NFL Slime Time is back with games. Now that's how we do it. Show the love for slime bites. Stars. Coverage. And the only place to see. It all leads up to the what's
Are you ready, kids? I can't hear you.
Wednesday night. Amazing. NFL Slime Time is back with games. Now that's how we do it. Show the love for slime bites. Stars. Coverage. And the only place to see. It all leads up to the once-in-a-life slime event, the Super Bowl. NFL Slime Time kicks off Wednesday night at 7:30 on Nickelodeon. Juicy Drop Gummy Dippin' Sticks. Pack the sweet gummy sticks and sour gels. Dip it, dip it, dip anyway. A study break, dip it, dip it, dip. A skate block, dip it, dip it, dip. It's your dip, your way. Juicy Drop Gummy Dippin' Sticks. What's inside of Color Princess? Where everything gets small is moving, everything is shifting. One style, super fun to make a lot of noise and be unstoppable. So, you can't stop. We didn't use a candy brain. I had a Captain Tie. Let's spin this out. Candy brain starts now. Jumbo Push Pop. It's candy water covered. Tasty. Magic Mixie's new Magic Ink Pad. Opening the Candy Always Kitchen Sundown. Pack the code. And one from hand. Combine the power of Candy's ring. It's almost time. Grab the hand to make the gem glow. And summon the magic mist. As the mist rises, say the magic words. Magic us, mix us. Behold, your Mixie appears. With the three wishes extra long. When your wishes come true, Magic Mixie's new Magic Candy Pad. It's so everything. It's new Push Pop Gummy Poppets. Sweet and squishy gummies for your container that lets you pop up the gummies for delicious fun. Pull, push, poppets. New Push Pop Gummy Poppets.